Okay, thanks. Yes, Dr. Burkett already introduced you to this project and the OrganiCA Project. And although I am from the University of Arkansas right now, I was at the University of Vermont when this project was initiated. So, and I have continued to stay as part of the team, which I really enjoyed having that connection back to Vermont. Anyway, just briefly saying repeating what Lorraine said this morning, we have two orchard systems here. One is orchard 1, where we planted new trees, and the rootstock is benign except for Honeycrisp, which is in M26 rootstock. And then the second orchard was an orchard that was 18 years old. We top-grafted that orchard with Liberty and McIntosh were the scions at the time, so we top-grafted it probably about 40-50 centimeters above the ground. So the interstalks for that orchard is either Liberty or McIntosh. So the cultivars that we selected with 3 of relatively new cultivars, Ginger Gold, Honeycrisp, and Cestar. And then 2 older cultivars, McCowan and Liberty, which is a scab-resistant cultivar. And we asked for growers' input to see what cultivars they thought would have the most potential for them. So I'm going to report on just a couple of things. This is a very large project, so I'm going to be reporting today on Orchard 1 tree performance, and on yield and tree growth, and for Orchard 2, tree survival and yield. So if you look here, Ginger Gold is overall, Honeycrisp and Ginger Gold are the larger size trees in this Orchard 1. This is the new orchard. And Honeycrisp is has a larger trunk cross-sectional area. And again, partly is because this Honeycrisp is on M26 rather than on B9. The other cultivars are relatively small size. They are not performing as well. If you see here, the orchard Honeycrisp has always been the larger of the trees as far as trunk cross-sectional area. We began with a larger size tree, and it continues to be larger. The trees now that they have gone into reproductive stage now, their trunk cross-sectional area has begun to decrease, but Honeycrisp remains still significantly different in size than the rest of the cultivars. And Liberty is the smallest of all our trees. When we look at yield, again, Ginger Gold and Honeycrisp are performing better than the other trees. When you look at marketable yield and yield efficiency, actually, and yield per kilograms per hectare, Honeycrisp actually has a larger kilograms per hectare in 2011. However, there was a lot more fruit rot and fruit problems, so more got called out as not the best. As you can see here, that's why you see lower yield efficiency in Honeycrisp. But overall, again, and you can see here, both Cestar and Liberty have a much lower yield in that planting. If we look at yield efficiency, when we started production, 2010 was not a good year. There was a hard freeze, so we had a lot of loss of crop, but you can see an increase in the yield efficiency for our trees. For all of our trees, some of them are much slower. Cestar began very, very low in its yield efficiency, has increased, but it's still pretty low, although there are no significant differences between Liberty, McCowan, and Cestar. So in conclusion, Orchard 1 up to now, we have small tree size. The trees are not as healthy as they should be. And Ginger Gold and Honeycrisp are doing better than the other trees in the planting. We can try to explain some of that poor tree performance, and part of it is B9. I think we didn't test B9 at UVM. But Massachusetts had a planting of this, and they never reported any problems on B9. However, our site in Vermont is very, very sandy site, so perhaps that's one of the problems that we have. And also, we can perhaps some of the problems are attributed to the lime sulfur applications. Since the 1930s, it has been reported that lime sulfur for scab control has a negative impact on apple photosynthesis. And it also has been reported to decrease fruit set. So perhaps these are some of the reasons why our trees are not performing as well. Orchard 2. Yield efficiency and let's just look initially at the kilograms per hectare. Our yields are much larger than Orchard 1, but if you can see here, our yield efficiency is pretty low, and I think the way we measure yield efficiency, which is kilograms per square centimeter of trunk. These are large trees to begin with because they were top-grafted, so the yield efficiency is not a good number to report to give us a good glimpse at what the trees are doing. Actually, probably the yield per hectare is a better number. But again, you see here that ginger gold and honeycrisp are doing better in yield than the other cultivars, particularly Liberty, which is interesting because in some of this there was no block effect, but some of these trees have been grafted. Liberty has been grafted on top of Liberty. And you can see there their performance is not that good. Oh, did I skip something? Yes, I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. There is a problem with tree survival in this orchard, and although I'm just reporting on the first years of production, if we were to look at 2006, 2007 on tree survival, we can see basically that, all throughout, ginger gold and honeycrisp have had very little tree death in that orchard. However, when you start looking at both Liberty, McCowan, and Cestar, you're seeing higher tree death, particularly the McCowan and the Cestar. But if you look, if I could show you another slide of 2007, let's say, after the first year of grafting, Cestar began to die earlier. And when we grafted this tree, the person that grafted the trees for us, a grower, mentioned to us that perhaps Cestar would not do it well as a grafted tree because it's a very precocious tree. So it initially wants to put on flowers, so it had problems starting as a grafted tree. But you can see kind of it has evened out the death. McCowan, on the other hand, started pretty well, but by 2009 began to die more. So, like I said, tree death, it is a problem in this orchard. But the good news is that basically that tree death has already stabilized, or it seems to have stabilized in the numbers. And you can see a little difference between 61 and 63. That's because the way we rated the trees, trees that might have been questionable, we gave them a lower rating, but yet after a couple of years they seem to have made it out. So the numbers are a little bit different between 2009 and 2011. You already mentioned in this slide that we have yield. The yield is much larger in this orchard, and but again, honeycrisp and ginger gold are performing better. And so Orchard 2 has better yield performance than Orchard 1, and the newer cultivars are performing also better in this orchard. And yield efficiency doesn't seem to be a good way to report the yield of these trees, and the question was, is top grafting a viable alternative? Top grafting is being done everywhere. If you look at growers, that's one way that they utilize to change cultivars. However, there is very little to none scientific information on top grafting, particularly the economics of top grafting. This is not a statistical comparison, but we're looking here. You can see Orchard 1, the kilograms per hectare in Orchard 1 versus Orchard 2 for the same cultivars. In some, for example, Ginger Gold is almost 3 times as large. Okay. In all of the cultivars, Orchard 1 is performing much slower. So in conclusion, we do have a talk on the economics of top grafting that was going to be looking and seeing whether it is a viable alternative. Biologically, it is totally cultivar dependent, as we know for grafting, and how do you determine it is difficult to tell. I mean, not until it's done that actually, and it might take years before it's actually known whether that graft combination is going to work or not. Any questions? No questions?
Oh, boy. Me first. Yes. No. About the top grafting. Normally, I mean, this is not a question, just a remark. Normally, when you top graft a plant that has a rootstock, from a physiological point of view, you have a rootstock which is maybe 10, 12, 15 years old, and then you graft some plants that are very new. In Europe, as far as I know, this is a practice that was practiced maybe 20 years ago. Now, nobody is practicing anymore because it has these problems, So I wouldn't say that it is economically viable. Actually, I was going here around and I saw some orchards that have been grafted. To me, I took pictures because it's something really unusual.
Yeah, and I have heard that it, particularly in Washington State, is being done. Am I correct, Jim?
Sorry?
It's actually a practice that is being done. Again, if you're starting a new orchard, especially on ground that you have had before, just the time that it takes to prepare the land, to take out the trees and prepare the land, and that's what we were looking at. Is that if you're going to go top graft versus starting fresh, what are the economics? And as I say, biologically speaking, it's working for most of the cultivars, but economically it might be a different story.
You were showing plants survival, which is 40% you are losing the plants for 3 varieties.
Right, and that's what I said. It's totally cultivar dependent. It is, to me, it's a very risky practice in a way.